Hello, everyone, and welcome to my favorite day of the week. That day that when we all get together to discuss what it means and looks like to live a balanced life. I'm Dr. Jackie here at Black Star Network, and let me tell you, today's lineup of guests and panelists will truly enlighten us all. You know, time is filled with swift transition, and as we're thinking about all things summer, trying to figure out how do we get our kids prepared and ready to go off to college, the different grades that they're going to, there is so much change that is happening in all of our lives. But when we think about change, it also has a way of leaving us off center, feeling a little bit wonky, if you will. I know I have those days myself where there's just so much going on in my life. There's vacation planning. There's summer school. There are things that are related to how I run my business. And for some of you, that may be the same. Today, our guests will enlighten us on what it looks like to live a balanced life as we all make these various summer transitions. We have today joining us Titania Harris, Corey Briscoe, Jamal Johnson, Dr. Shayna Lewis, Dr. Tierney, and Stacey Owens. Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
Hey, Dr. Jackie.
Welcome, everybody. Let me just tell you, I have to ask you as we kick off this show, you know, summer is one of those times where people are saying, how do I get myself together for the latter quarter of the year? And seemingly when we're, you know, in May and June, we're not thinking about what September and August may need to look like. In each of your lives, can you just share with our audience for a moment, how do you decide when is a good time to prepare for the last quarter of the year? Dr. Titani. No, I tell her that all the time. She hates when I say that. So everybody, future Dr. Tanny will always be future Dr. Tanny. And so I'm not going to put any pressure on her. So
the pressure just keeps mounting as I take these classes. One of the things, first of all, thank you so much for doing this show. I'm excited to be here. Nice to see everyone. So one of the things I do in terms of preparing for the last quarter, I actually prepare for each quarter with by looking at my goals for the first month in the quarter. So if we're talking about the last quarter of the year, I start thinking about those goals in that September, October to sort of just kind of help me navigate what I want to do for the rest of the year.
So 1 month at a time, beginning at the beginning of the month, gives you that ability to kind of lay out your plans. And I hope that audience, as you're listening, that you're taking these good tips and notes. You have literally sitting right here in front of you, experts who can tell you how to begin to organize, plan, and prepare. Stacey Owens, tell us.
So for me, it's very interesting because for the school year, I'm closing out the school year, but at the same time, I'm thinking about how we're going to open for next year. So I'm always planning for the next quarter by evaluating where I'm at now, determining what my future needs are going to be, and then start researching what or different programmings that can satisfy those needs, and then just start mapping it out so I can find those who are in my support system that may need to help me. So just create your plan now so that you can be prepared for the quarter as it approaches.
All right, Dr. Tierney, tell us.
So I take a month-to-month approach. At the top of every month, I look at what it is that I want to accomplish in this month. And then within that month, I actually break it down by weeks. So the first week, if there's any deadlines, any specific date-specific things that I need to accomplish, I break those out by the week. But I look at my year in each month and then plan that way.
Planning escapes no one. And I tell everybody this all the time, that without planning, you are truly destined to fail, whether it's in your personal relationships, in your business life, how even with yourself. Sometimes we fail ourselves because we fail to plan how we need to approach and engage ourselves in the environments in which we find ourselves. Corey Briscoe, now as a business owner, a board member, you have a host of things going on. So tell us what your calendar looks like and how you settle yourself into readiness for what's next.
The calendar looks treacherous, but what I have learned is that the balance and the construction of my calendar depends on me and how I look at what has to be accomplished. So for me, I take an annual approach. I try to plan I take personally I take significant time off at the end of the year to recharge and to plan. And so I look at holistically what the year is going to look like for me and identify what are my big milestones? What are the goals that I'm trying to meet? What are the things that I am trying to fit out? And I then organize them by quarters and I go by month to month. But I've learned to be flexible and pivot. And so what I tend to do is collect myself on a quarterly basis at the end of the quarter to assess, what was I realistic? Could I get it done? And then based on that, being a business owner, my life, it being a business owner, being a husband, and then being civically involved, I have to realize that there's so many things that are interdependent. And so for me, it really is sitting down and being able to identify a level of prioritization. And sometimes I've learned that even in my best intentions, I just can't fulfill all my obligations. And I've become one with that. And so I make smart goals that are more realistic and not what everyone wants me to accomplish.
Thank you, Corey, for sharing those words of wisdom. Truly, planning is a very big part of all of our lives, and having a system and approach is very important to being able to stay engaged. Because honestly, when the planner is off center, everybody's off center and everybody's plans go awry. Up next, I want to introduce you to one of our guests, Dr. Shayna Lewis. I'm excited to have her join us today. Hey, Dr. Shayna.
Hello, Dr. Jackie. How are you?
I am doing well. I am so delighted that you are joining us today. And I know that our audience is going to meet you and get to know you a little more later on. But could you share with us, how do you plan, either personally or professionally, getting prepared for the last quarter of the year?
That is such a great question. And I echo the response that Corey just gave. So I begin my planning end of December, beginning of usually the end of December. And I finish it at the beginning of January, but I look at the year in its entirety, but then I break it down into 90-day portions so that each quarter I know what I need to do in order to reach my greater goal. I call them 365 goals. The goal I want to have happen December 31st is my 365, but I break that down quarter by quarter. So once I have what I need to do quarter one for it, then I break that down by the month, I break that down by the week, and then I literally break it down by the day. And then I do that for each quarter as I go. So the fourth quarter, I already know that's going to be the end of whatever I've been working on. If it's a year-long goal, with some of them I may finish before the year is over, but especially for those that take a longer time to accomplish, I've been working on it all this time. So it's really already prepared and set up for me, and I track it. That is one of the things that I think is extremely important in our planning, is that we track our progress. I created an entire 90-day tracking journal for that purpose, because what we do not measure, we do not meet usually. So we have to make sure that we're tracking it. So for me, the planning piece and the tracking piece are the two most important parts of preparing for any quarter, but especially as we prepare for the end of our year.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Did you guys catch those words of wisdom that she just gave? Honestly, planning is a process. There is an art and a joy to balance living, and being able to do so also requires you to understand who you are, where you're going, and what works best for you. Our next guest, which I can't wait for you guys to talk to him, Pastor Jamel Johnson. Welcome, sir.
Hello, how are you doing? Thank you for having me, Dr. Jackie.
I am delighted that you are here. Now, you're going to tell us a little bit more who you are later on in our show, because I'm excited to have a one-on-one with you. But in your work as a pastor and your planning for your personal life and for your family, what does that look like for you? Because oftentimes people think the pastor's work is only at the church, and we all know that not to be true.
Right. And I actually echo everyone's sentiment. But there are two words that I will pull and extract from everyone's response. Smart prioritizing. Smart prioritizing. One of the things in being a pastor, I'm on call 24/7. I wish it was just Sunday morning, but I'm on call 24/7. So there are some things that I may have in the book that may have to be erased or moved around, especially considering how life events can alter our daily schedule. But then being engaged in the community. I teach a class at HPD, sit on several boards. I am the executive director of our nonprofit, The Fulfillment Project. And the summer, is actually when we host our largest outreach event. So for me, it's really about having smart prioritizing, identifying the things that are important. Once I identify those things that are important and need my hand specifically, then those are the things that I dial in on. And a big thing in being a pastor is delegating. I think that that helps me be able to be as effective as I can be, and ensuring that there are some team players that wear the same jersey that I do that can go out and help me meet some of those things, those responsibilities that I have to meet on a daily basis.
Did y'all hear that? I think that there's a quote that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And today, what you just heard are a few tips and ways in which you can discover how to balance your life by having smart goals, planning ahead, looking at your calendar a year in advance, knowing who it is that you want to take with you. But most importantly, don't leave yourself out. Include yourself in your plans so that you can enjoy the summer vacation. You can enjoy the things that you're trying to accomplish. When we come back after the break, we're going to get a little bit more specific. Some of you out there are trying to figure out how to get your kids not only through graduation, but you're trying to discover how to prepare them emotionally, spiritually, socially, coming through this pandemic to get ready for their next grade in life when we're back after the break.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back to A Balanced Life. I'm Dr. Jacquie, and I am so delighted with the guests and the panelists that we have today. You know, summer is a time of readiness. I know you've already got your passports ready, you booked those tickets, and you're preparing for vacation. But before you can get to that, some of you are in that space where you're trying to figure out how you're going to deal with being an empty nester if your child is graduating and going off to college. Others of you are trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my second grader, soon to be third grader, my kindergartner, soon to be first grader. And let me just say, each of these ages and stages in which we find our children, now, whether they're your kid that you raised or you're raising someone else's kid, whether it's a niece or a nephew, we all have say in what happens in the lives of our village members. And so let's get this conversation started. Hey, gang, come on back in. Let me tell you, when I think about how families are trying to wrestle through, struggle with getting prepared for students and kids who literally missed 2 grades of being in school because of the pandemic, getting them prepared socially, emotionally, and moving in them, you know, through meeting new people and what that looks like, I can only imagine that it is a daunting task. And, you know, for this conversation, I want to talk to Dr. Shana and then also talk to future Dr. Tanny and also Stacey Owens. You guys are in that space where you're working with individuals, coaching them, counseling them, and being an administrator at school, getting them engaged and prepared. So Dr. Tierney, Dr. Tanny, Stacey, and Dr. Shana, let's have a conversation. So ladies, sorry, gentlemen, not to exclude you, but I got something else planned for y'all. So ladies, let's have this conversation about readiness levels, because as parents and as aunts, you all each serve your community in different ways. So Titani, Stacey, Dr. Shana, and Dr. Tierney, welcome. All right, so for my MSW and my LPC, let's have a talk about this emotional engagement that our children are seemingly having to face when they are adjusting to what it is that they need to go through. So Titani, in your work as a social worker and dealing with kids, how are you preparing them and parents for readying up for the next grade level?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Jacquie. So, you know, one of the things that we've done as a result with the pandemic. Let's just acknowledge what this trauma has been like for teens in particularly, right? It has exacerbated symptoms of anxiety, depression. That's what we've seen in our work. And so we started our teen talk workshops as a result of the pandemic to sort of address those issues. I think one of the other things is to acknowledge that change is inevitable. This pandemic has shown us that change can happen anytime. And change is also hard because of the unknown, right? It's this fear of not knowing what's going to happen, whether it's a big or small change, right? And so things like graduations, new jobs, new relationships, parenting your children, these are things that can sometimes cause worry. And so some of the tips that we've given, not just parents, but for parents to share with their youth is how to manage the changes, how to manage the transitions. And so one of the first things I think about is redirecting the uncertainty. And what do I mean by that? We have to live in the moment and give ourselves grace and focus on what's real and not what we think will happen. And also another thing would be what we talked about early is having a plan, right? Some people like to have a plan, some folks don't. I would encourage parents to have a plan because there's no right or wrong way to do things. But when a major life change happens to unfold, it might be good to have a plan. And so this helps alleviate some of that uncertainty and makes it easier to embrace the change.
Embracing change. So, Dr. Shana, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and help us and our audience identify and understand how to deal with these levels of change and anxiety that people go through so that they can begin to build a toolkit that will aid them with these varying levels of change.
Well, Dr. Jackie, that is an excellent question. That's loaded. So I'm going to try to take it a little bit at a time and just offer a few things for folks to think about. Well, I do have 20 years of experience as a licensed professional counselor. My specialty has been working with women and adolescent girls related to stress, transition, depression, relationship problems, and things of the sort. And so when you ask the question, how do we deal with the anxieties and how do we deal with the change? My sister said a minute ago, it has skyrocketed in the pandemic, not just for our children, but our peers and colleagues, the adults. We have struggled as much as our children have. One of the key things that I ask folks to consider how do we manage this anxiety? How do we deal with all this transition? And it is what we've heard. It's creating structure. When we have structure in our lives, we have an expectation for what is about to happen. Now, there's structure with flexible thinking that needs to go with it. Because as we were in the pandemic, as soon as we thought we knew we had something figured out, it all changed, right? And if you were stuck on what it was you thought it was supposed to be, you had more difficulty adjusting emotionally because you were like, well, wait, I thought that's what we were doing. So we need to have structure, not just for ourselves, but our children thrive on structure. They thrive on knowing what happens next and what is it supposed to look like. So when you're talking about creating a plan for the summer, you want to make sure that your children know what to expect. Are they going to summer camp? Are they going to grandma's house? Are they going to stay at home on their own? What's the plan? And I would encourage parents to give them something to do, even if there is no camp or something that you can send them to perhaps, but give them some things to do even while they're at home so that they have an expectation for their day. What we don't want to do is sleep away the whole summer because that's not good for anybody, actually. We want to keep our minds moving, occupied in a productive way. So that's what I would say. I would just add that to the toolkit that all of us are providing here. Create structure, but also add that flexible thinking with it in the event that things need to shift and change because of some unexpected thing that may show up.
Yeah, let me put a pin in that for a second, because you were right. That was a loaded question. And when you think about the flexibility and the fluidity of the things that go on in our day to day, oftentimes that needle moves slow, and then it can move so fast that it's rapidly going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And you don't know how, as I'm going to ask Dr. Tierney, not only how to level up, but how do you sometimes figure out how to power down when there's too much going on and you seemingly just can't get a handle on how to figure out what to do next? Dr. Tierney.
Perfect. So this is where I start talking about some of the grounding exercises, staying in the moment, particularly when things are starting to move really fast, after spending over 20 years in the higher education space. My graduating seniors, that was the thing that they really would come to me and talk to me about. They had gotten into the rhythm of the 4 years of being in college, and now I'm graduating college, and what is this? And wait, interviewing and job. Oh, wait, I have to get my own insurance, and what does that look like? And do I go back to grad school? And wait a minute, my parents said, and and so it can happen really, 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 really fast. So doing those grounding, activities, being in the present, not looking too far in the future, but looking at where you are right now, and just taking an assessment of what you need in this moment, practicing that gratitude piece, acknowledging everything that you've learned over the course of these past few years, and using that to help to secure you that what to do when the next thing comes, even if you don't know what that next thing is, that you have that capability there, that whatever it is, you'll be able to handle it. Something else that I want to add here is that in this piece of transition, often during the summer, we focus a lot on the students, our children being in transition, but the parents are in transition too, and this is something that I ask parents to kind of take a look at, is their transition. Like you said, they may be becoming empty nesters. They may have children getting ready to go to pre-K for the first time or graduating pre-K. So there should be a preparation from the parent side as well. Just as you're celebrating your graduates, celebrate your accomplishment, celebrate all of the hard work that you have done. If there's a piece in there to allow yourself to grieve, if you're an empty nester and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know, the house is going to be so quiet, giving yourself permission to do that. Start thinking about what your new parenting style, would be. As your child is graduating and going off to college for the first time, or graduating college and starting their new jobs, that means there's some transition in the type of parenting, that you might need. And also thinking about what it is that you need, in this season of your life. So just kind of looking at the transition from a holistic standpoint, but also making sure that you're staying in the present and grounding yourself where you are right now, so that you're not becoming super overwhelmed and becoming anxious about all of the things, that are happening.
All of the things that are happening. Stacey Owens, now let me just say, as you work with your teachers, as you work with administrators and the students and the parents at your school, you have the ability to see whether or not a child is at the space that they need to be in, and they're ready for first grade, they're ready for second grade. And you're in a unique position. Something that most of us have no knowledge about is how these kids came to school in the pandemic. Some of your kids may have come from another school and they were out for a year or 2 years, and then some of the kids stayed the entire time. How do you help them adjust and adapt, Stacey, to moving from grade level to grade level, and establishing for them some type of a grounding or a baseline to say, I can make it in third grade, I can make it in fourth grade, and giving them the skill set and the confidence that's required as they move through life?
So I like to say we should be proactive so that we don't have to respond from a reactive state. So for us, as our students transition from grade level to grade level, it's pretty much having those conversations about those social and emotional conversations about what to expect at the next grade level. We like to make sure we prepare them for any conflict resolutions, like, can you solve problems? Can you identify? You're going to be working with different peer sets at different academic abilities. What tools and what resources do you need as a student so that you can be successful at that next level, so that we can deal with any anxiety that the student may be feeling with change? I also like to say that for us, every home is not necessarily a supervised, structured, or safe home environment. So where we like to have these conversations and say that when we're talking with our parents and giving them tools and helping them, it's always ideal that you'll have parents that are ready for that and very receptive of receiving the information that you're giving, so that you can help students with any learning loss and so forth. But for us, we're always focusing on, what if we're in a situation where we don't have that kind of support? Then how can we stand in as an extended resource to cover those gaps? So now we're looking proactively for other programs that we can put in place or that we can direct parents to. So it's just really knowing and building those relationships so that we can know what we're dealing with the child and at home.
Thank you for sharing that, because there's both the internal and the external opportunities as we think about what summer is going to be like for our children. Some of you will have your grandkids, some of you will have your nieces and nephews, others of you will be going away and taking trips. But as it was just stated, home is not always a stable and safe place. And we need to have time and opportunity for our children to be able to be exposed to different things. When we come back after the break, we're going to talk to two gentlemen who could probably shed a little light on opportunities outside of the home for our children to grow and advance when we're back after the break.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, we are helping you fill your basket, fill your toolkit, fill your arsenal with the tools and the tips that you will need to be ready for summer. Whether it's your first summer job, whether you are trying to discover and figure out what to do with yourself or with your kids over the summer break, here is where you can find some opportunity to stay sane. I'd like to talk now to Pastor Jamel Johnson and Corey Briscoe. I am believing for certain that these gentlemen are going to be able to shed a little light on some things, because oftentimes, guys, in our spaces, we think about what moms can do. And we don't always say, what is dad going to do? What is uncle so-and-so going to do? What is cousin so-and-so going to be able to bring to the table? But you two are in very unique spaces where when we think about how do we help our children, and I'm going to start with the pandemic first, because both of you operate from a church space perspective. And there was a time when the church seemed to be left out of the conversation. And what are we going to do when we open to be able to engage our families and our children again? So I want to start with Pastor Johnson to talk a little bit about the church. Seemingly the church was left out during the pandemic, knowing when to open, what we were going to do, how we were going to stabilize our families. So Pastor Johnson, how did the pandemic work for you in the church, and now going forward, preparing our students for activity?
Great question. To be perfectly honest with you, our church never closed during quarantine. Now, I know that may sound a little scary, because there's a mandate. Nobody was supposed to be in large gathering spaces, but our building closed, but our church didn't close. Mm-hmm. So I know that may be a flip on your question, but maybe a year prior to the shutdown, we actually started to engage our partners, and that's what we call our parishioners partners, to see our online campus is not just an option if you're running late, if you had to work over, but really see it as another place to have church. So in 2018 up through 2019, we really actually promoted our online experience just as if you would come into the building. So we already had things in place. So when we were out of the building, we just told people to meet us online. And so throughout the course of quarantine, we learned how to let technology be our friend. And so we adapted so many different new ways of doing ministry, so many different ways of connecting with parents, having Zooms with parents prior to the actual Sunday, where we would coach them in how to actually have Bible study with their kids, sending them the material, and everything was electronic. So we actually learned how to embrace that space rather than allow the shutdown to embarrass us. I believe earlier there was a word that was used about pivoting. And there are so many industries. I was in a meeting this last week, and they said that young thought leaders of this generation have caused industries to pivot and change. And the lasting message was, if you aren't willing to change, you won't be existing. And so there are so many opportunities that now have been made available that were not available prior to, because so many things had to happen in a brick and mortar, but now online is available. So this summer there are entities that are getting back to the face-to-face, where I believe that families could utilize that, but there are also places that are online. Virtual experiences where a child can be inside of their home, but they can also take a walk through the White House virtually. And it could be something that the family could do together. Or here in the city of Houston, which we are blessed with such diversity and such richness, there are so many different free options that I believe families could take advantage of that really allows a holistic approach. The museums, our zoos, I mean, so many things that were closed down during quarantine. But I honestly believe, to answer your question, it's really about being plugged in and being knowledgeable of what's around you, and then taking advantage of the opportunities that will help also foster new opportunities, new experiences, and expose your children to things that they may now grow up to be 10 to 15 years from now.
Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned the word adaptability, and earlier someone mentioned the word flexibility. And then, I know one of Corey's favorite words is pivot. And Corey, as a church board member, as a churchman yourself, oftentimes the church does get left behind because of its inflexibility. Now that churches are open and technology is here to stay, can you talk for just a moment about the advantages of having an open mind to how the gospel can lead people in a direction that can literally give them balance and sanity?
I love that, Dr. Jackie, and I think the first thing is that let me go to Pastor JT and say I love how he said that. Right, our buildings were closed, but those of us that understand that we are the church have a different perspective on that. As in executive leadership in churches, and then by way of consulting, right, we have seen how this pandemic nationally has affected the church, and I would argue it has forced the church to level up and grow up. There were innovations and things that the church has needed to do for so long. And when I'm talking about the church body that we've needed to do and pivot for some time, and we haven't. And sometimes the good Lord makes us do things that cause us to go beyond what we think and understand. But really, as you say, to become better and more effective witnesses of the gospel. And so when we look at churches and the disruption in technology and the disruption in industries that was referenced earlier, the church is not immune to that. And what it has caused us to do is look and assess, are the things that we're doing, are they producing a return on our investments? Are they the most capable? Is it internal or is it external? And how is it allowing for the witness of the body of Christ to show up? And so, when I look at where we are and how we can use technology and how we can use this new kind of state of being, it's actually an incredible moment for the church to shine and to show how the gospel, despite being place-based, right? It doesn't need to be place-based. It just literally needs to be shared. And so whether social media or online presence or chat rooms, or even now they've got metaverse church, right? They've got all of these new technologies that are allowing us to be innovative in the gospel. And so I'm looking at our youth ministries, and we are now literally, you've got Roblox and all the games that your kids would understand. They play it all the time. Well, let's create a church version of that. Let's talk about how we build up communities and all of these things that they are so proud to do and enjoy doing. And in tandem, what they're doing and what they're getting is exposure to the gospel. So we have to think unconventional. And I'm grateful for what, I hate to say this, for what the Lord has allowed for the church to experience.
All right, gentlemen, you guys said a couple of mouthfuls, but that whole what the Lord has allowed is tripping a whole bunch of people up. Yeah. When we come back after the break, I want the group to gather together to talk about how do we overcome what we thought was impossible as it relates to this pandemic. We have masked up, gloved up, we are washing our hands, we're using hand sanitizer, and then all of a sudden, the world is wide open. And in that openness, it is causing us to pause just a little bit and say, I don't know about this. So when we come back after the break, we're going to get a few tips on how to really embrace going forward and getting out into the world again when we're back after the break.
Put 10 in here?
10, and you don't come out until you die. And you eat him, you eat 10.
Oh my God.
Welcome back, everybody. Come on back in. Let me just say, we're back after this break. And, everyone has given us some good tips and tools related to how do we move ourselves forward with our families? How do we get ourselves prepared for the next quarter? I have to say, it's very important to back into your year. Start in December. Move yourselves forward. Know what it is you want to do and be able to put a plan in place. But this pandemic, oh my goodness, has tripped us all up. I'm going to invite everybody back in so that we can get a few tips from each person about how do we settle ourselves and say, this is the next new normal. And no matter how much we think that this COVID-19 virus or any version of it is going to go away, sadly, the CDC says it is here to stay. So with that in mind, Corey Briscoe, what is one thing that you can say to help people embrace and just get out there and go?
Before the pandemic happened, right? We just went. We were driving ourselves into the ground. And now we've actually been able to pause and assess whether we need to participate in those things that sometimes we didn't want to participate in anyway. And so what I tell people to do is do this, right? Identify what is going to bring the most value to your life, whether it is socially, whether it is fulfillment. Start there, looking at how the thing that you can do, right? Getting back into it, whether it's, introvert versus extrovert. Some people say, I haven't had people connection, that I'm an extrovert and I need that. Well, maybe it's a small intimate group, where maybe it's going to a small networking function that is observing COVID protocols that makes you feel space. But I tell people this, it is about what you need and not what you are mandated to do. And that's in the essence of, as we've learned, COVID has taught us, even things that we thought we need, we don't necessarily need it.
I sure freed up my time. Dr. Shana, give us some tips on how to move on.
So one of the things that I share with my clients, Dr. Jackie, is to control the controllables. What do I mean by that? There are going to be a lot of things in this world that we have absolutely no control over. And when we spend excessive amounts of energy trying to control something that we don't have the authority, the power, the resource, whatever it might be to control, we only make ourselves feel worse. We're the ones left frustrated. So at this time, when we're figuring out how do we create what life looks like now moving forward, I say figure out what are the components of your world that you do get to control and focus there. You get to decide what you do with your person. You get to decide what you do with those who are connected to you, whether those are your children or what your family decides to do. Taking care of yourself. I'm a major proponent of self-care. I encourage us to do that in order to maintain our wellness so that we can show up in this space of uncertainty that may happen. But while we're controlling the things that we can, we actually feel at more peace. We feel more secure, and we will actually feel less anxious when we focus on the things we can affect change in. So that would be the thing that I would encourage the audience to put in your tool belt. You might even make a list. I tell folks controllables, uncontrollables. The things I can't control, you yield those and give those away. And those that you can, you focus on and you do something about. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Stacey Owens.
Just like my colleagues have said, I believe that everyone has to take their own temperature. So first, connect with yourself and connect with your feelings about what getting out into the world. Everybody is saying in school now, we're back outside. What does that mean for you? And how do you feel about that? Does it entice fear? Does it entice anxiety? And then identify why, and then push through it so that you can deal with those emotions that you're feeling, and you can move past the fear of getting back out in the group of everyone, and then do what you need to do to be safe. So if you still want to wear your mask, and don't care about what other people are doing around you. If you don't want to do the things that the CDC recommend, then don't do it. But know what it is that you want to do, why you want to do, and then just keep moving.
Consequences for all your actions. Dr. Tierney.
So I want to dip back to something that you said, what God has allowed. And I have to pull out my my Bible here for a second. And this is where I pull up Romans 8:28. All things work together for the good. Not that it is good, but as we find ourselves in this transition, the ups, the downs, the uncontrollables, the things I didn't expect, the things I wasn't sure of or didn't know that was going to happen, we have to remember that all things work together, and so let that be your guiding beacon as you are finding yourselves in these transitions, making your plans, maintaining your flexibility, even if things happen that were not necessarily that good or don't feel that good. Remember Romans 8:28, all things work together for the good.
Thank you for sharing that. And it actually puts us, in that space of saying, I need a little levity in my life. Pastor JT.
Yes, ma'am. Everybody has said everything that I was going to say. So I will just say ditto, but I will add this. The pandemic taught us that it's better to be planted in soil than cement. There are so many things that we believed had to happen or had to exist, and we put cement around them and made them monuments. But we saw over the last 2 years that those monuments came down, going all the way to our favorite Sears and Roebuck. It's not here anymore. There is more online commerce that is happening than any other time before. People are not going to the mall. Amazon is coming to their house. So when you understand that there has been a shift, a worldwide shift, you will now challenge yourself to be planted in soil and then allow the tree to produce the fruit. Because the fruit on the tree is what dictates what the tree is, not the tree itself. So you just stay planted and continue to grow. And the fruit that come forth, that's going to be what's going to sustain you in this season and the season beyond.
Now I want y'all to hold on to that word that the pastor just gave. If you missed church on Sunday, on a Tuesday, you got the word that you missed. You have to be careful about building monuments around things that were never meant to last. When I come back, I'm going to give my reflection for the day when we're back after the break.
It's time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no punches! Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way. Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Wow, Roland was amazing on that.
Stay black. I love
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared. You dig?
Welcome back, everybody, to A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We have heard today how to gauge the temperature of our lives, discovering where we are, what we need to do, and how to move ourselves forward. We have even discovered how to guard our hearts so that we don't put ourselves out there too soon, too fast, to do too much in a season where we may need to just kind of step back and settle in. But then most importantly, how do we guide ourselves in order to be able to move forward? Each and every day, we are going to be challenged on the left, on the right, and sometimes you're going to get stuck in the middle. But I hope today that you've been given some tips and tools by our guests and our panelists on how to reach into that toolkit, figure out the things that are for you and say yes, and those things that are not for you, be comfortable with saying no. This is all a part of discovering and how to live a balanced life. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and I look forward until we are together next time. Bye now.